So then we'll continue now. This is supposed to be an on your own part, but I'm going to help you get started with getting the airports loaded up, and then you can decide whether you want to isolate or select Reagan National Airport or Dulles. This is too funny. There are so many students that have done this now. You can just go in and add one of these. If some, let's see, you wanted to do Dulles Airport. Let's see if it works. This was 9/20/2021, so somebody did that today. Just go ahead and add it. Let's see what happens when you add Dulles. Yep, that's right. So there you go. Life just got easier. Somewhere in the parking lot at Dulles Airport. Change the style for Dulles Airport. It now says location only, which is fine. Click on symbols. Choose transportation, I believe it is, yes. And we can use a symbol that looks like. At this point, the lesson becomes very similar to the Beirut instructions. So you want to go back at step 41 here. In step 41, you're going to go back to step 28 through 30 and just do the buffers around the airport. So as you work through buffering the Dulles Airport or Washington National, I don't care which one you do, make sure that you've typed the values in for the buffers. Don't copy paste. Type it all out. Make sure those spaces are between the values. Make sure you change the distance to kilometers. And down here where it says buffer of Dulles International Airport, make sure you put, actually I would change that, just make it shorter. Just call it buffer Dulles or buffer national. And then put your initials. So that it's not like anybody else's. And then run the analysis. Okay, so that took a few minutes. I'm working in the evening. Everything is working faster than it did at school. So I think you'll find a similar speed increase working from home with your own internet connection. So I'll let you change the colors to that same ramp color scheme used for Beirut. And the airplane here is looking a little bit big, but I also notice it's on the bottom. So I'm going to move that to the top. But it's still too big, so I'm going to go in and change the symbology on that and make that a little smaller. And then I'm going to show you how to do the last part. So I reduced the airplane to 25 point, looks much better. And you should take a screen capture when you've changed your colors to the red, dark red to light red. Take a screen capture and put that in the box underneath step 42. Step 44, search for layers. DC underscore Maryland underscore Virginia underscore block pop. But the one we want is the one by Mary Schaefer. And notice it's a lot of data. So I'm setting up the filter of Dulles Airport buffers, and I've added the first expression. Distance in kilometers is 0.5, and a second expression, the buffer distance is 4.8. Everything looks great here, but you got to look really carefully at the instructions because it tells you to just change this bar here at the top from change it from features in the layer that match all of the following expressions. That's an impossible request. So what we're going to do is change that match any, and then we can run it. And it might take a few minutes. Okay, so let's turn DC Maryland block pop back on. And what do these mean? These are not individual people. These are what are called census block centroids. Census blocks are small chunks that are smaller than zip codes that the U.S. Census Department uses to keep track of how many people live in certain areas around the country. And census blocks in our area are very small because we have a high population. And out in rural areas, the census blocks can be as large as a county. Okay, and the reason for that is they try to keep the number of people per census block the same everywhere. In order to do that, you've got to make smaller census blocks in the urbanized areas and larger ones in the rural. Makes sense, right? And here you can see that this blast out to 4.8 kilometers has impacted some population here in, looks like eastern Loudoun County, and a little bit over here in the western part or central part. So here I'm into the expression for finding existing locations. It's set to DC, Maryland, Virginia block pop. That's the layer that we're performing this analysis on. Then I clicked the green add an expression, and I'm in the midst of designing that expression, and I'm going to find what part of the block pop is completely within the part of the Dulles buffer that I've selected out, which is the 0.5 to 4.8 kilometer range. And hit add, and then down here find locations block pop, take everything out except the block pop, and then put the underscore 0.5 underscore 4.8, and then your initials. And then run the analysis. Now when the new layer comes in, block pop population within those buffers, click on the attribute table. You can expand this up a little bit, and it says to go over and click on population 2010. And when you do that, you have a choice to look at the statistics summary here. There are more complicated statistics we can look at, but this is a quick glance feature in the headings of the attribute table. And so we can see that the number of values is 200. That's the number of dots here. And the sum of all these values is 38,000 people. Remember, each of these dots represents more than just one person. Those are the block pop populations, the census block populations. And when you add all those up, you get 38,000 people. The maximum number of people in one of those census blocks was 2,093. The average is 190. And the standard deviation, well, doesn't matter. Okay, and we can also see the number of households. Look at the statistics and the number of households. Again, it's 200 dots, but there are 13,000 households represented. Okay. For question 50, you'll take a screen capture of one of these statistics windows, leaving your attribute table open with the dots showing. Make sure that you capture your logged in name up here. Basically grab the whole screen. So now let's take a look at hospitals and schools. We don't have those layers yet. I'm going to turn off this block pop that was within the buffer, and I'll go ahead and turn off the block pop for the whole region just to make the map a little bit more agile. So now we're going to search for the hospitals. I've gone back into ArcGIS Online and I've typed in the US hospital locations with bed count 2017 HOSP Geo. Let's see what happens when I hit return on that. And there it is right there. Okay, so we're going to add this layer. This is going to be a big one. Don't know why it's centered up on New Mexico. Probably a spatial bookmark, but we'll zoom in on our area. Okay, there we see some of the hospitals. None of them are within the buffer where the severe damage is. So now we're going to expand this buffer to include out to the 24, I think it was 24.1 kilometers. So we go up here to this buffer that we can turn on and off here, and we're going to go into the filter and we're going to edit it, and it's just involving adding another expression, and this time we're going to change it to the buffer distance in kilometers is 24.1 and apply and zoom to that filter. Okay, and now you can see we are including some within that 24 kilometer buffer zone. And you can use this image to visually inspect and determine your answer for number 54. And you can use it for number 55 as well. So now I've searched for Fairfax County school facilities at step number 56, typed this in into the search bar, found school facilities right here, so I'll add them. There's a lot of them. We can collapse that. And one of the things that it wants us to do is search for how many high schools would be damaged by the blast. And you should do this using, so here I've filtered all the high schools. Everything shown here, all schools here are high schools. So here I've set up a find existing locations to find the facilities that are now remaining after being filtered to just high schools that are still completely within the buffer out to 24.1 kilometers. Now I'm going to run it and wait. So I've got my finding existing locations for school facilities, added an expression, school facilities completely within the buffer, and now the buffer includes out to 24.1 kilometers, and the only school facilities that should be included in this expression are going to be the high schools because they've already been filtered. So we'll run it and see what happens. Here we go. Click run. Oops, got to change the name. I'm going to call this high schools within 24 kilometers. And my initials. And we'll wait. And there you go. You can see the blue dots. It's selected these, the high schools that are within the buffer.